The silence in Elizabeth Carter's penthouse on the Upper East Side was almost surgical, broken only by the discreet hum of the state-of-the-art climate control system. Through the immense floor-to-ceiling glass walls, Manhattan stretched out like an illuminated chessboard, but to the 47-year-old CEO, that view of Central Park was nothing more than a cold frame for her own chronic loneliness. Dressed in an impeccably tailored charcoal gray suit, she held a crystal glass of premium, mineral water, watching her weary reflection betray yet another night of insomnia battled with anxiolytics. The environment, decorated with brushed steel and white marble, exuded a sterile wealth, a fortress of success built to conceal the vulnerability of a woman who, despite being a billionaire, felt the weight of a void that no annual bonus could ever fill. The scene shifted abruptly when Elizabeth's armored sedan, a black monolith of technology and luxury, was forced to divert from its usual route due to a tunnel blockage, plunging into the gray underbelly of an industrial area beneath a bridge in the Bronx. The contrast was violent and immediate. The gleam of glass gave way to graffiti-stained concrete and the lingering smell of damp metal and exhaust fumes. Above, the deafening roar of the elevated train made the structure tremble, a frenetic rhythm that ignored the existence of those seeking shelter in the gaps between the support columns. The biting wind of that winter night swept debris across cracked sidewalks, while the yellowish lights of old street lamps flickered, revealing a world of shadows and needs that Manhattan's elite preferred to pretend did not exist, where survival was measured in minutes, not quarterly profits. It was precisely under that hostile structure that Elizabeth's fate collided with the raw reality of Maya Johnson, an 18-year-old young woman who maintained a strangely upright posture amid the chaos of misery. As the driver of the armored car gestured impatiently on the phone due to a sudden engine failure, Elizabeth lowered the tinted window, feeling the shock of icy air against her carefully cared-for skin. Her eyes met Maya's, seated on a wooden crate, wrapped in a coat 3 times larger than her slender body, and surrounded by 2 younger siblings sleeping curled up beneath a worn blanket. The image was one of silent humiliation in the eyes of society, but what truly paralyzed the CEO was not the extreme poverty, it was the object the young woman held in her hands, reddened by the intense cold. The tension in the air was palpable when Elizabeth realized that the girl was not extending her hand to ask for alms, but holding a visibly battered and stained copy of Principles by Ray Dalio, a pillar of elite financial literature. The CEO felt an involuntary tightening in her chest at the sight of torn pages being handled with almost sacred care by someone the world had already discarded. Maya lifted her gaze. Showing neither fear nor subservience toward the powerful woman in the back seat of the luxury car, and fired off a short question that cut through the noise of the elevated train like a blade. "Do you know what this term on page 40 means?" The gesture of pointing to a complex concept of risk diversification was the trigger that set in motion an irreversible transformation in both of their lives, uniting 2 opposing worlds. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. Elizabeth Carter did not reach the top of the Fortune 500 by chance. She built her empire upon layers of emotional concrete that concealed a past she was desperately running from. Born in a dusty trailer park in rural Texas, she learned early on that vulnerability was a target and that poverty was a smell that clung to your skin if you didn't run fast enough. For decades, she used financial success as armor, firmly believing in the American rhetoric. That individual effort was the only variable of success. Yet as she looked at Maya beneath that bridge, Elizabeth saw a distorted reflection of herself, a version that hadn't been lucky enough to find a way out, and she felt the first crack in her facade of self-sufficiency. Maya Johnson, on the other hand, carried the premature wisdom of someone forced to become an adult before childhood had even ended. After her mother's death from a treatable illness and the disappearance of a father consumed. By addiction, she became the only shield standing between her 7- and 10-year-old siblings and the brutality of the streets. Her hands, marked by small scars and constant cold, were not used to beg, but to sketch complex logistics and economic schemes on discarded pieces of cardboard. She found her teachers in the trash bins of public libraries and saw in the torn book by Ray Dalio not merely an object of study, but a map to a territory she was determined to conquer, despite every statistic. Being stacked against her. Inside the armored car, the silence between the two women was broken only by the sound of the heater struggling against the New York winter. Elizabeth, driven by an impulse that defied her business logic, invited Maya inside, watching the young woman's shock as she touched the genuine leather seats with her worn clothes. The conversation began in a technical tone, a discussion of management principles that soon evolved into a connection charged with unspoken emotions. Maya spoke with an intellectual clarity that disarmed the CEO, explaining how she applied financial hedging concepts to ensure her siblings had food every day, turning scarcity into a science of survival that Elizabeth had never seen at Harvard. Maya's journey, however, was surrounded by obstacles that went beyond the lack of money, involving relentless state bureaucracy and systemic prejudice. Elizabeth listened in horror as Maya described visits from social workers who threatened to separate the siblings due to the lack of a fixed address, and how she had to hide in the shadows to avoid being taken into a foster care system she knew was deeply flawed. Every word from the young woman struck a blow against Elizabeth's idealism, which until then had believed the system worked for those willing to work. The bond between them grew stronger through this shared pain, a mixture of mutual admiration and the realization that both were prisoners of their circumstances, though at opposite ends of the social pyramid. Fear was Elizabeth's greatest internal enemy, as she worried that helping Maya might force her to relive the trauma of her own impoverished childhood. She questioned whether her actions were truly genuine or merely an attempt to find a quick cure for her insomnia, even as her company's board was already beginning to question her erratic behavior. Externally, the pressure mounted as Elizabeth decided to take Maya and the children off the streets, placing them in a secure hotel under her financial responsibility. Resistance from the Carter Cosmetics board was immediate. They saw Maya not as raw talent, but as a public relations risk, a charity project that did not align with the image of sophistication and exclusivity of the global brand. Elizabeth then chose to issue a challenge that was, in truth, a wager on her own intuition. She would give Maya 30 days to prove her worth at the company's headquarters. The young woman would have to navigate an environment where the cost of a cup of coffee exceeded what she spent in an entire week on the streets, facing disdainful looks from employees in expensive suits. Tension escalated as Maya was subjected to rigorous competency tests, while simultaneously grappling with the psychological trauma of having lived for years in a constant state of high alert. Elizabeth watched from afar, torn between the desire to protect the girl and the need to see whether she could survive the sharks of the corporate world. Without being consumed by them. Daily coexistence revealed Maya's purity. Even amid the opulence of the CEO's office, she remained focused on learning and on securing her siblings' future. She was not dazzled by the lights of Manhattan. Her goal was concrete and urgent, sharply contrasting with Elizabeth's existential anguish. The CEO began dedicating her nights not to sleep medication, but to mentoring the young woman, discussing market strategies that Maya refined with a practical and innovative perspective. The emotional bond between them overflowed the professional sphere, transforming into a mother and daughter relationship that neither of them had expected to find amid spreadsheets of annual profits and losses. However, social criticism soon began to leak into the press, with malicious headlines suggesting that the billionaire was using a homeless young woman to polish her public image. The board's pressure reached a breaking point when one of the directors, envious of Maya's rise, began investigating Elizabeth's past in Texas, threatening to expose her humble roots. Elizabeth felt the ground shake beneath her feet, fearing that her empire would collapse if the truth about her origins were revealed to the world. The fear of being rejected by the elite she had fought so hard to join paralyzed her, while Maya, sensing her mentor's anguish, offered the only comfort she knew: the resilience of someone who has nothing left to lose. Maya's own traumas also resurfaced in moments of stress, such as when the sound of a slamming door made her flinch, reminding her of confrontations beneath the bridge. The bureaucracy of social services continued to pursue her, demanding proof of stability she had not yet fully achieved, creating a constant tension that everything could be taken from her at any second. Elizabeth found herself fighting on two fronts, protecting Maya from the grip of the legal system and protecting herself from corporate intrigues that sought to undermine her authority. The tension grew steadily, like a rope stretched to its limit, setting the stage for a confrontation that would require more than just money to resolve. On the 20th day of the challenge, a serious financial error was detected in one of the company's main accounts, and all the planted evidence pointed to Maya's access to the system. The office turned into an inquisition court, where the young black woman from the streets became the obvious target of every accumulated suspicion and prejudice. Elizabeth found herself standing at an emotional abyss, questioning whether her trust had been betrayed or whether she was the victim of a larger conspiracy meant to bring her down. The bond they had built seemed on the verge of shattering under the weight of doubt, while Maya maintained a dignified silence, looking only at Elizabeth with eyes that asked not for mercy, but for justice and recognition of her truth. Adding to the dramatic weight, the former street exploiter who used to extort Maya under the bridge appeared at the company headquarters, causing a scene and demanding money in exchange for not revealing the children's whereabouts. The contrast between the material wealth of the marble lobby and the moral poverty of the blackmailer created a grotesque spectacle that drew the attention of employees and the media alike. Elizabeth felt the burden of shame, not for Maya, but for how easily cruelty could infiltrate her carefully controlled world. The tension reached its peak when the board issued an ultimatum. Elizabeth must fire Maya immediately and hand the children over to the state, or she herself would be removed from her position as CEO for administrative negligence. In the final paragraph of this section, Elizabeth finds herself alone in her office, staring into the void while holding the bottle of medication she has not used for weeks. She realizes that her entire life has been an escape from herself, and that Maya, in her vulnerability, was the only person who truly saw her without the mask of the powerful billionaire. The emotional bond between them was not merely a matter of charity, but an anchor of humanity in an ocean of corporate superficiality. With time running out and external pressure becoming unbearable, Elizabeth understands that the decision she is about to make will define not only Maya's future, but the rest of her own existence as a human being capable of love. The climax reached its boiling point. In the boardroom on the 40th floor, where the executive council awaited Elizabeth's surrender in the face of fabricated evidence of Maya's financial misconduct. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic sound of rain striking the glass, while projectors displayed manipulated numbers meant to incriminate the young woman who, seated in a corner of the room, kept her hands steady on Ray Dalio's book. Elizabeth looked at the directors' icy faces and then at Maya, realizing that the $10 million discrepancy was not a mistake, but a brilliant maneuver by Maya to expose an embezzlement scheme that had been operating for years right under the board's nose. In a moment of absolute courage, Elizabeth not only ignored the order to fire her, but brought up the real data on the screen, proving that Maya's intelligence had saved the company from a catastrophic internal fraud. With her voice trembling yet firmer than ever, Elizabeth walked to the center of the room and made a revelation that silenced Manhattan. She confessed before everyone, and before the cameras broadcasting the meeting internally, that her journey did not begin in a golden cradle but in a miserable trailer park in Texas. She declared that the true fraud was not the financial error, but the system that tried to crush talents like Maya's simply because of the color of her skin or the origin of her address. I spent 20 years trying to forget where I came from, but this young woman reminded me that a human being's value is not in a bank balance, but in the ability to see solutions where everyone else sees only problems, Elizabeth said, as genuine tears streamed down her face, dissolving decades of emotional isolation. The moment of greatest impact came when Elizabeth turned toward Maya, ignoring the protests of the directors who now feared for their own positions after the fraud was exposed. She knelt down to the young woman's level, took her cold hands, and in a transformative exchange, made a proposal that went far beyond a job offer. She asked to begin the legal adoption process not only for Maya, but also for her 2 younger siblings. "I don't want to be your boss or your mentor for a 30-day trial. I want to be the family you should never have lost," Elizabeth said, as the weight of the loneliness that had consumed her seemed to evaporate in the face of the shock and hope that lit up Maya's expression. The CEO's transformation was unmistakable. The steel armor had fallen. Away, revealing a woman who was finally finding a true purpose for her immense fortune. The next scene was a whirlwind of emotions, with Maya finally breaking down in tears in Elizabeth's arms, an embrace that sealed the end of an era of survival and the beginning of an era of belonging. Maya's siblings, watching from a side doorway accompanied by now compliant security guards, ran in to join the embrace, creating an image that contrasted the opulence of the boardroom with the simplicity of reclaimed human love. The director, who had plotted against them, was escorted out under looks of disdain, while Elizabeth, right there, signed the preliminary documents that guaranteed custody and full support for the Johnson family. Power that had once been used to exclude was now the ultimate tool for protection and for rescuing lives society had already judged as lost. Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now let's continue with the video. The positive. Resolution of the story materialized in concrete changes that transformed both the structure of Carter Cosmetics and the social landscape of New York City. Elizabeth Carter not only legally adopted Maya and her siblings, but also restructured her company's charter to become a certified B Corporation, tying profit to measurable social impact. The once cold Upper East Side penthouse, formerly a mausoleum of silence and insomnia, now resonated with children's laughter and the vibrant movement of a real family. Elizabeth discovered that true wealth was not in the view of Central Park, but in the peace of mind that came from seeing Maya's siblings attending excellent schools, and in the satisfaction of sleeping every night without the aid of chemicals, filled instead with a sense of fulfilled duty and genuine love. Maya Johnson, now a rising executive and an economics student, became the face of a new era in American corporate philanthropy, leading projects aimed at uncovering hidden talent. In neglected areas. The foundation established by Elizabeth, with an initial endowment of $50 million, ceased to be merely a cardboard dream and became a network of high-performance centers in underserved neighborhoods. The transformation in Maya's life was complete. From a young woman fighting the cold beneath a bridge to a leader using her voice and intellect to open doors that had once been locked. Elizabeth's reconciliation with her own past in Texas finally allowed her to integrate her history, becoming a more empathetic mentor and a leader respected for her integrity, not merely for her wealth. The vision of the future presented in the ending is one of hope, grounded in action, not merely in beautiful words. The company flourished financially, proving that ethics and inclusion are powerful drivers of innovation and consumer loyalty in the global market of the 21st century. Elizabeth and Maya work side by side, no longer as mentor and apprentice, but as partners who share the same vision of a world where a child's zip code at birth does not determine their destiny. The morale of the story is crystal clear. When economic power is united with human resilience and compassion, even the most rigid barriers of society can be torn down, creating a legacy of dignity that extends far beyond financial performance charts. We conclude with Elizabeth and Maya watching the sunset from the foundation's terrace, surrounded by young people who, like Maya once, needed only an opportunity to shine. The cycle of suffering has been broken. giving way to a current of solidarity that began with a simple question about a book of principles and ended with the rebuilding of entire lives. Human connection proved to be the most valuable currency in the world, capable of buying the one thing money alone never could: a true sense of purpose. Elizabeth Carter, the woman who had everything and felt nothing, finally found in the act of caring her greatest asset. Leaving fear behind and embracing a future where love is the ultimate metric of success. 10 years later, the cameras capture the inauguration of the Elizabeth Carter Foundation, a cutting-edge educational complex in the heart of the Bronx, built on the very site where makeshift shelters once stood. Maya Johnson, now a grown woman and CEO of the foundation, steps onto the stage to the applause of hundreds of students who see in her living proof that talent is universal. Elizabeth, with gray hair and a serene smile, watches from the front row, holding the hand of one of her grandchildren. The final scene is cyclical and powerful. Maya walks over to a young girl sitting on the sidewalk near the school and hands her a brand new copy of Principles, with a dedication that reads, "Knowledge is your freedom." The cycle of transformation closes and begins again, ensuring that the seed of kindness continues to take root in new generations. Have you ever done an act of kindness that changed a life? Comment "Love has no price" if you also believe in human kindness. Subscribe for more stories of second chances.